then you grew up in, I think, Larkspur, right? Or something like that?
Yes, exactly. I grew up in Marin County. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Larkspur and San Anselmo. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And then I was seeing that continuing with the Bay Area theme, you also went to college. You went to UC Berkeley,
Right.
and you got a degree in Japanese language and literature.
Correct.
And was your interest in Japanese culture and language something that started when you got to college, or was that something that you had been interested in for a long time?
Well, my college career was long and varied. I first started out at College Marin which was called a junior college in those days. Now I don't think they call them that, but they call them community colleges or something, right? But I started there, and then I transferred after 2 years. I transferred up to Sonoma State, and uh, and I was there for a while. But it was the '60s. Things are pretty confused. I happened to pick up a guy hitchhiking, and because you could do that in those days and survive. And I picked up this guy hitchhiking, and it turned out he was a merchant seaman. And I said, "Oh, that sounds pretty cool. How do you do that?" And this was I had just Nixon instituted this draft lottery, and I had a really high number, so I wasn't going to get drafted. And so anyway, long story short, I ended up on a ship that crewed up in Japan, and it was a tanker, went back and forth between uh, Japan and various ports in Asia and the Persian Gulf. And so I did that for a while, about 6 months or so. And then I got off the ship and I thought I'd go to Japan and visit. And I was there for 2.5 years that time. I went down to Kyoto, and I couldn't speak Japanese at the time, and didn't know what to do about finding a place to live, but I thought it'd be cool to live there for a while. So I just stuck out my thumb, and this guy picked me up. I figured out if I stuck out my thumb, somebody who spoke English would probably pick me up. And so there was this kid kind of that his English wasn't great, but it was okay. And so he introduced me to his brother, who introduced me to a geshiku, is a kind of a student lodging kind of place. And so I got a room there, and that's how I kind of started living in Kyoto. I lived there for 2.5 years. That's when I first became aware of Antaiji. And this friend of mine told me, "Hey, you need to get your life straight, man." And I said, "Okay." And they said, "You need to do some zazen." I said, "Zazen, what's that?" And they said, "Well, you sit in the zazen posture. There's this temple up in the north at Kyoto you can go up to, and they let anybody sit there. So go up there." So I said, "Well, okay." So I did, and that's how my association with Antaiji started. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah, that was pretty crazy.
I mean, what a weaving adventure to get to that point too. I mean,
Oh
you're
yeah,
there you were working within the merchant marines, merchant seamen, and then you're
yeah.
going out and you're finding yourself being interested in Japanese culture, being, ended up staying there, hitchhiking there, which is also kind of I feel like a very adventurous quality that kind of like, and it's nice that you got to pay it, I guess, retroactively forward. I don't know how that would pay it backward. Like you gave someone a ride before, and now you're getting a ride later.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, maybe.
and yeah, I don't know how. Yeah, and and also too, I mean, how special, because I looked up on Taji's the grounds, and I looked at some pictures online just recently, and it's in the mountains, and it's surrounded by, I think now it has surrounded by national forest there.
No,
And
no, Antaiji no longer exists in Kyoto,
mm.
and that's where I was. I
Oh.
have visited the place that is way up out. Yeah, it's on the Japan Sea coast area. Yeah, and they have very severe winters there and lots of snow and stuff like that. And I visited there a couple times, but primarily my experience was with Antaiji in Kyoto. And Uchiyama Roshi was the abbot when I was there. And then he retired, and the subsequent abbot decided it was too noisy there, and it was getting really developed and noisy. When I was there, it was pretty quiet, but uh, sometimes there were problems. But so he decided to sell the place, sell the property, and move it up to the Japan seacoast up there. And
Oh, I
uh,
see.
now all that remains of Antaiji, in fact, I was just there this summer, is a little plot, a small plot of land with a kind of a memorial marker on it that said this is where Antaiji was. You know, that's all that exists in Kyoto now. But you
Wow.
can still practice if you want to endure those hardships up on the Japan seacoast. And yes, that's the story there.
Yeah, well, thank you for going over that. Yeah, because the, some of the pictures I saw online, there are these like blankets of snow, and it's a
Yeah.
very kind of beautiful, kind of foresty. Well, how did that feel to see that the where it was originally, where there's just that plaque that kind of shows you where the plot was? Did that have a emotional impact on you, or did it kind of feel like it's just something that you more or less anticipated and accepted?
Well, things change, right? So that was that Abbott's decision, and I can't really say anything about that, but there is a priest there that has a small temple called Seitayan, and his name is Takamine Doyu-san, and uh, he's a Roshi too, but so I visited the property with him, so it was sort of nostalgic, to be there with him and talk about the experiences with Uchiyama Roshi and stuff like that.
Wow. Wow. Well, and so when you were doing that, when you were on Taiji, you were there, how did you find that not only that was the place where you wanted to start establishing your formal Zen practice, but you also started to realize that Uchiyama Roshi might be your teacher? Like how did that relationship develop?
Well, again, it was just by chance that I ended up at Antaiji, right? And I mean, because if you look at the formal Zen temples around Kyoto, which there are plenty, Nanzenji, Daitokuji, some of these, right? More those are Rinzai focused temples, and so of course Antaiji was more Soto focused, and so anyway, I think what attracted me is in these other temples, if you wanted to go sit in the Rinzai tradition at Daitokuji, for example, one of the big Rinzai temples in Kyoto, you would need a letter of introduction. You would have to like go through some sort of a vetting process, where you'd have to sit at smaller temples first and whatnot. In fact, a good friend of mine, a guy named Ray Coffin, did that. And he was for many years sitting at Daitokuji, very severe, almost militaristic style of Zen practice. And but Antaiji was totally informal, totally informal. I mean, you go in the Zendo, there's a zafu and a zabuton, and you sit down on there and just keep your mouth shut. And they ding the bells when you start and ding the bells when you stop. And you know, there was no chanting whatsoever, so there was no chanting practice, that sort of thing. Although this book that's coming out, very soon that I imagine we'll talk about, but the is about chanting. But I really struggled translating that word because it's more like Uchiyama Roshi meant calling out, like you're at the end of your rope, you've got nowhere to go, nothing, you're hopeless, and you call out the bodhisattva like you'd call out to your mother or something. So anyway, I'm getting off this off the subject. I'm digressing here, but anyway, The only time I ever heard chanting at Antaiji was when they did an ordination ceremony. And I think they chanted the Heart Sutra or something like that, and that was it. So there was the practice at Antaiji consisted solely of zazen, shikantaza, just sitting, and they did takohatsu too, where they went out and on alms rounds, all over Kyoto and in various places.
Wow.
That was a practice. And they
Yeah.
grew a few vegetables too, I think, and then of course there was the tenzo, the that practice, and they used wood fires. And there's some other people that I could introduce you to that would probably be better inform you about that kind of practice because they actually lived at the temple. I never lived there. I lived very close, within a couple of minutes, within this kind of apartment building where a lot of foreigners lived. And we would walk over during sessions. That was the big practice at Antaiji, was sessions. So these are like extended periods of sitting for mostly for 5 days, and they would start at 4 in the morning and end at 9 at night. And there would be 3 meals, and the sitting periods would be for 50 minutes with 10 minutes of kinhin, walking meditation, and and no talking. And at meals, you would make gestures for eating. They gave you as much as you wanted. The meals are very simple: brown rice and gruel and vegetables and pickles, Japanese pickles and stuff. That was it. And for 5 days, except for the really cold times, I think um, I want to say February or something like that, they would just have 3 day sessions. And then the really hot times, they like in August, they would have 3 day sessions. And or I may be mistaken there. I think, as I recall, in August they just didn't have session, and then maybe in February they didn't have session. But most of the time it was 5 day sessions. Uh, they didn't do special sessions for the Buddha's enlightenment and all that sort of thing. Because Uchiyama Roshi said, we don't need to do that. We have sessions every month. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I like how you described the way that Antaiji was in relation to other more formal temples in the area. And it's great to have this insight into how it operated and how it was approaching things like sesshin and things like that, where
Right,
it's about that type of approach to practice as opposed to having a lot more of the form or other elements that maybe some of the more like larger and that have that kind of like a more rigid framework around it.
right.
And then just curious too, because I do want to talk about the text that you wrote and that you translated, and I do want to get into that, but I also just was curious about that push that you got to get your head right, man. Like, I was just wondering, I was wondering about that, like what you felt like. What about Zazen? Did it because it stuck, right? I mean, like you did end
Right.
up going back and back and back, and so I was wondering what about Zazen kind of helped you feel grounded or help kind of take care of your head in that way.
Well, I was from San Francisco in the 60s. I was a musician. I played in rock groups in Fillmore and Avalon Ballroom and places like that. So man, I was just getting my head together, and it's like I was 21, 22. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was didn't know really, and so I thought, well, I'll try this Zazen thing. And at first you think, well, I'm going to try to get enlightened and all this stuff, all this silly stuff that you think. But, um, the thing Uchiyama Roshi always said, And his teacher before him, Sawaki Doshi, who was a really apparently charismatic, amazing guy. But I never met him because he had passed before I got there. But in that tradition, you know, they always said Zazen is good for nothing, period. Okay. Now, if you tell that to most Americans, it's like, you know, I took some Tai Chi for a while from this teacher, and I was saying, like, they had a lot of stuff kind of going on there, cultural things. And I said, why don't we start a Zazen group here? You know, he says, Zazen, okay, why would we do Zazen? And I said, no reason, we would just do Zazen, you know. He says, well, what benefit would I gain from that? Because he's a martial arts practitioner, right? So he's thinking, well, if I do Zazen, maybe, you know, I can get my kata better or, you know, whatever. And I said, no, there's no benefit. He said, well, why do it then? Right? Because our lives are just about gaining, aren't they? You know, we're trying to gain something, trying to gain money, we're trying to gain fame, notoriety, we're trying to gain whatever, right? But Zazen is not about that, it's beyond that, you know. So of course we have to live in the world, we have to make decisions, distinctions, whatever, but Zazen is not about that. It's not about getting famous. It's not about getting some certificate that says you're enlightened. And that's what attracted me to Uchiyama. And he told, you know, he would say he was really he had some problems with the Buddhist establishment uh, in as it existed because you know the way it is sometimes is you know these guys the young kids that uh, they they inherit temples in Japan and so then they got to go to basic training for like 6 months or so. They go to Eiheiji or Sojiji or one of these temples, and they beat them up and whatever for 6 months. And then when they finish that, they come and inherit their father's temple. And some of these temples are quite lucrative. And so they got away from Dogen's teaching, which is shikantaza, just sitting. So Uchiyama Roshi and a lot of the teachers, or a lot of the people that are now teachers, like Okumura Roshi in Indiana there, but in what am I'm forgetting
Bloomington?
Bloomington. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
So I'm old. I forget stuff. Okay. So anyway, you know, there's this kind of you know, thing about, you know, Antaiji wasn't the kind of place you would go for that kind of training. Antaiji was just about sitting, that's it, you know. And if you wanted to go there to get famous or to gain some certificate, you're going to the wrong place. Me being a 60s hippie, that appealed to me and a lot of us. I wasn't obviously the only one. There was plenty of foreigners that were there. And so that appealed to me, that kind of kind of a rebellious quality about it really appealed to me. Um, I mean, not to say that he had big fights with you know, or he had any, but he was about the truth. He was about finding out the truth of Buddhism and religion in general. You know, I talk about, well, in this book that I translated, he talks about his experiences with Christianity, with you know, Pure Land Buddhism and other forms of Buddhism. So he was just, you know, he was just looking for truth. So, and his language, the way he talked was plain. He didn't use a lot of Buddhist technical terminology to sound erudite. He was just really simple kind of guy, you know, and so that really appealed to me.
Yeah, and just so I feel like we can get right into it. The book is the sound that perceives the world calling out to the bodhisattva. This is by Kosho Uchiyama, and with a foreword by Shohaku Okumura that you translated this work, and it's published
Right,
by Wisdom Publications, and it's due out November 25th of this year, which is
right.
so exciting. I mean, it sounds like such a wonderful and special uh, text, and in the way that we had been talking just a little bit about before, with especially with chanting. And I wanted to know if you can kind of share some of your insight to Uchiyama's relationship with chanting, because it sounds like before he could undertake more formal sitting zazen postures and showing up for it in that committed way, chanting was helpful because he was doing other things that were more physically laborious, or tasks that were otherwise keeping him from sitting. And then of course, he had his sitting period in his life, and then when he was suffering from some illnesses, he had to once again kind of put more emphasis on chanting because of what he was able to do. And there was this part too in the description for the book that talked about how at one point Uchiyama Roshi found a connection between zazen and chanting, the Kannon-gyo, and how they were two sides of the same coin. I just was curious about that, how that relationship between the two came up.
Yeah, well, this book was, I'm a student of Okumura Roshi's, and we were talking one time, and he was saying, yeah, this Uchiyama Roshi wrote this book called Appreciating the Kannon-gyo. He says, I'd really like to translate it, but I just don't have the time because Okumura Roshi really kind of works pretty intensively on Dogen and translating fascicles of the Shobo Genzo and that sort of thing. So he just didn't feel that he had the time to work on this. But he thought, as we get older and it becomes more and more difficult for us to assume the Zazen posture, um, what happens then? And for people who can assume that for whatever reason can assume the Zazen posture, how can they practice? And so he said, it'd be good to translate this book so that people could see there's another way of practice that that they can do and without physical limitation. And so I said, since I'm stupid, I said, okay, I'll translate the book. and, and so like what, 6 or 7 years later, here we are, you know, because it really took time. And then, of course, publishers have their own constraints. And so they couldn't publish it immediately. And so I had to wait a couple of years for that to happen. And so, but anyway, the genesis of the book is really found in the first chapter. This is telling about Uchiyama Roshi at that point in his life, which was towards the end of the war, World War II, and he was a pacifist, and he had no interest in military service or in working in a munitions factory or something like that. So his teacher Sawaki Roshi gave him and a couple of other monks permission to leave the temple where they were and to go into the mountains in Shimane Prefecture and work making charcoal. And he thought, oh man, that sounds really cool. We'll just go up there and, uh, in the wintertime there when it's cold, we'll be just sitting in this warm room, burning charcoal, burning wood to make charcoal. And I'll be able to read and, we'll just chill there and whatever. And it'll be really cool. And I don't think he used those words, but anyway, he went up there not knowing anything. So he goes up there and this is a really severe place in Japan. It's like on the Japan seacoast, and so the storms come over from Siberia and they dump huge volumes of snow on their, and it's frequent whiteout conditions, right? And So they're there, and nobody, this is the end of the war, and nobody has any food or any fuel or hardly anything, right? So they they're put up in this guy's place in the second floor of a storage room, and I don't even think there's any tatami mats, or if there are any, there's just a few. And so they have to figure out how to sleep, and they don't have warm clothing. They had jikatabi, which are, or I don't even think they had jikatabi. I think they had to make their own straw sandals. So they had to go out in the snow in these kind of conditions to up in the mountains carrying these heavy tools, axes and saws and whatever to fell the trees. And then it was a very steep mountain, so they had to just throw the logs down the mountain and go down and pick them up later. They had to cross over wooden bridges with streams and ice. It was very easy for them to slip and fall into the creeks and freeze, get frozen, and so it was really horrendous. The only food they had was they had very, very little rice, so they had to ration their rice. And they didn't really have anything to cook it with. I think they figured that out eventually, but they had radishes, but they just ate them raw because they didn't have the fuel to cook them. Um, and this with Uchiyama Roshi, he had a history of tuberculosis, and it was in remission, but still, he was never very strong physically. And so anyway, in this environment, uh, one morning he got up, and it was funny. I guess at first they thought, "Oh, it's snowing. We could take the day off. Cool." And of course, all the people in the area thought they were lazy. And he says, because they couldn't afford not to work, right? And so they very quickly got the message that snow days were not days off. You continued working. So anyway, one morning he got up, looked outside, and it was a whiteout. I mean, it was freezing and snowing, and he was trying to make some little breakfast, for everybody, and he started to get really depressed. And he thought, oh my God, we could walk up in those mountains and get, frostbite, and our hands are freezing, so it's very easy to lop off a finger or something when we're using an axe or something. Oh my God. And so he started to get really, really depressed, and he didn't know why, but he just started chanting Namu Kanzi Ombosatsu, Namu Kanzi Ombosatsu, Namu Kanzi Ombosatsu, Namu Kanzi Ombosatsu, and over again. And he didn't do it consciously. He didn't know why he was even doing it, but he just started doing it. And after he did it for a while, he felt some relief. I mean, it wasn't miraculous or anything, but he felt some kind of relief. And he goes, and he thought like, huh, that was weird, because he was had a master's degree in Western philosophy from Waseda University, is a very prestigious university in Tokyo, and he had studied Western philosophy and rationalism, and he wasn't at all what he just thought these stories about people being saved by Kannon were ridiculous, and and yet he had this experience. So he started thinking, well, why did it, how did this happen, And he thought it was sort of like calling out to his mother, because he was in such distress, emotional distress, and but he didn't know. And his mother had always chanted the Avalokiteshvara Sutra, and they had a shrine in their house. And they were at one point fairly well to do, and they had a little shrine in their house, and they had a nun lived there, I think, and took care of it and whatever. So he was exposed to this Kannon-gyo when he was the Avalokiteshvara Sutra, um, which by the way, is chapter 25 of the Lotus Sutra. That's what the Avalokiteshvara, that's where it comes from. So anyway, he was exposed to that at an early age from when he was a kid. So he thought, well, maybe it's got something to do with that. So anyway, he sent a letter to his mom and asked her to send copies of the Avalokiteshvara Sutra, the Kannon-gyo, and he would read them, whenever he had a chance, uh, during their workday. But he had no time to do zazen at that time because the conditions were just too severe. They were just trying to struggle to live, and so that anyway, that started a lifelong interest for him in the Kannon-gyo and what it was all about and how it was related to Buddhism and how it was related to Zen practice. Not only the Kannon-gyo, not only that, but also a Pure Land practice of chanting what's called the Nembutsu, you know, um, uh, gratitude to the Bodhisattva, Amida, for their compassion. So anyway, he had a predisposition towards that as well, and later on in his life, as he, after he retired from the temple, he was in pretty bad physical shape just before he retired from the temple because of his tuberculosis came back, and he would, have episodes of, uh, vomiting up blood and stuff. I know it's kind of gross, but I'm sorry, but so he was in pretty bad shape. So he couldn't do zazen. So he says, "Well, what can I do?" Because I made a vow to continue my practice, you know, for my life, and so what can I do? And so, according to his assistant, Shushoku Kushia, who was his assistant after he retired from Antaiji, he told me that he didn't observe, he told me that Uchiyama Roshi told him that he would chant silently to himself the Nembutsu, the Nam Amida Butsu, and at times where he felt gratitude. At times when he felt he was suffering, he would often chant Namu Kanzeon Bosatsu, asking, calling out to that bodhisattva. So that was surprising to me, this whole thing, because he
Yeah.
was always such a strong advocate of zazen and shikantaza.
Yeah. Did and I don't know if this is something that you learned when you were at Antaiji, but were there any questions about, hey, can we incorporate some chanting? Because it doesn't seem like chanting was necessarily a part of the practice in a very formal, strict way. But was there any kind of nod to this
No,
Kannon-gyo before? No. Wow.
no, 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 no.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And thank you for providing context around that story. I mean, that story, the hardships that he was going through, laboring in the mountains with making charcoal and the snow. It's a very vivid picture. So thank you for describing it. But also, it's just like I just really feel for that experience for him. It sounds
uh,
like a really really difficult time. Um, and then too, just with that, the Kannon-gyo being one side of the two-sided coin with Zazen, having that kind of connection there between the two. Um, I was seeing something a little bit similar with some interviews or maybe some videos I've seen of Shohaku Okumura Roshi talking about depending on the mindset, you can do Zazen while you sleep, you can do Zazen while you do the dishes. There is this like kind of approach of awareness that you can apply, especially with what we were talking about before about Zazen being good for nothing. That's kind of where the first time I heard that kind of phrasing come out through Okumura Roshi. And also too, something else that I noticed within that kind of lineage, the physical labor, the hard work element, physical hard work element also was with Okumura Roshi because I think for a time he was a stump he did with stump removal.
yes, he
Um,
did. Yeah,
and it's just like really, really labor intensive, physically demanding work.
yeah, that was in
And
Valley Zendo in Massachusetts. Yeah,
yeah,
he was
yeah.
one of the founders of that place.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. It's amazing to kind of see so many correlations between the stories there, and how Zen is applied or how it's expressed in those conditions, under those conditions.
Right.
Um, and thank you also for offering um, your insight for the Pure Land connection. Um, Having worked so intensely with this text, with what you translated, and with this sutra, did have you started to incorporate some chanting into your practice? I mean, has this for the time that you were working on it, did it open something up for you in that way?
Yeah, I translated this, and so I said, gee, I guess I should try it, you know. So yeah, I do at times call out, and uh, I have no idea. Even this, I like the title of this book, "The Sound That Perceives the World," because that was what Uchiyama's, usually, typically, when you talk about Kanzeon or Avalokiteshvar, you talk about the bodhisattva who perceives the sounds of the world. In other words, the bodhisattva perceives the suffering of the world, right? That's the usual translation. But Uchiyama Roshi turned that on its head by saying the sound that perceives the world. There's no more bodhisattva. I don't know that. I don't understand it, to tell you the truth. It's, to be honest with you, it's a koan to me. It's kind of a koan, and I maybe before I die I'll understand it. But and I kind of took a stab at maybe saying, well, maybe it's trying to get beyond dualism. It's trying to get beyond, you know, uh, thinking about things, and maybe that's what he's trying to get at. But unfortunately, I talked to Uchiyama Roshi many times because, when I first went to Japan, and then, then my wife and I traveled throughout. My wife's Japanese, and we met in Kyoto there, and we traveled throughout Southeast Asia and India and Nepal and Afghanistan and whatever. And then we came back to the U.S. and that's when I went back to school again, and that's when I went to UC Berkeley and studied Japanese language and literature. And then I went back to Japan again, and I lived there for 9 years that time. So the first time, 2.5 years, and then about a little over 9 years the second time. And then I returned to the US. But when I was there the second time, Uchiyama Roshi had retired, but I used to go to his house in this place called Uji, which is kind of near Kyoto. And I would go visit him at his house there. And it wasn't his house, but he was given a place in a temple there. And so I used to go and talk with him there and ask him a lot of questions and whatnot. So just so you understand that. So I never had a chance to talk to him. I translated this book after I came back to the U.S. and rekindled ties with with Okumura Roshi, who I knew in Kyoto, but we hadn't seen each other for a while. So, and then that's when I started translating books. So unfortunately, I never had a chance to talk to Uchiyama Roshi about anything in this book. I wish I had known that, but I
Yeah,
did my best.
you sure did. And I appreciate you, by the way, kind of going over the context of the title, because it is the way that you uh put some context on it. Like, it really is it's a very thought-provoking, as you said, kind of like a koan like statement. And there's something very intriguing about that, as far as, like, wanting to dive into the text and kind of appreciating more of what's written in there. But just even just that phrasing alone is something that it's worth thinking about. So thank you for providing that. And then just as far as, like, your personal practice goes, because I know that you, like you were saying, you've gone back and forth from Japan, and you had a teacher student relationship with Uchiyama Roshi, and then you came back to the U.S. and you rekindled your ties with Okumura Roshi,
Right,
and you took lay precepts with him at Sanshin in Bloomington, Indiana.
right.
And I was wondering what kind of made you want to do that, and how did that kind of connection, how did the rekindling go, as far as, like, what it was like for you.
I don't know. I can't get away from this Buddhist thing, man. I don't know why. I mean, I just sort of keep coming back to it somehow. I don't know. Um, I was thinking like maybe because I was nostalgic. I was thinking like, yeah, Antaiji, that was a really amazing experience, a once in a lifetime kind of experience. It was experience of history of 20th century Buddhism. I mean, Uchiyama Roshi and Sawaki Roshi, they were incredible people. And wow, that's cool. And Shock-san's still around. I call him Shock-san, which is very disrespectful. But he and I are friends, and we have been friends for over 50 years. So anyway, so I just can't get away. I mean, like because it's about your life and what life is about and what meaning of life is and this sort of thing. It keeps bringing me back. I don't know. It's like a hook that keeps bringing me back.
Yeah. And,
So we started a group here. It's called the Everett Zazen Group because I live in Everett, Washington. But most of there's no. I'm the only one that's from Everett. But another friend from Seattle, and then well, actually two friends from Seattle area, and then a lady that's in Minnesota that really likes sitting in Uchiyama Roshi's style of sitting. We do it on Zoom. We used to do it in a church, but it just didn't work out very well because they all have all kinds of activities going on. It's noisy and whatever. So, um, we just decided to start doing it on Zoom when COVID came, and then uh, it's just easier to do it that way. So we have a Wednesdays, we sit an hour of zazen and then we talk about some book from our tradition, Uchiyama Roshi's tradition or the Soto tradition or Dogen or Okumura Roshi's books. We read them aloud and then discuss them. And then on Saturdays, we do three sessions of zazen. So that's kind of my practice right now. So
yeah,
yeah,
and it's a wonderful thing that you have established because, and especially making it online, making it accessible, and I think also too, like within the website itself, which is I believe it's everettzazengroup.org.
right,
You kind of more or less explicitly state that this is something for everybody, and should somebody in your area or I mean anywhere globally want to
right,
participate, you are offering a sitting group and I think it's a wonderful thing too, especially with just like everybody, like the
yeah,
world schedules. Everyone's got different things going on at different times, and so for you to offer something, a space, to be able to sit for that specific time twice a week is just a really wonderful thing.
right.
And yeah, I'm very appreciative of that. And when it comes to just like when engaging with the people in your group, is there something right now that you're reading as a group that has shed certain light on things for you or that has been of a particular interest?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. It's because I want to share this book with you. I don't know if you can see it there.
Yeah, The Roots of Goodness.
Yeah, have you ever read this?
I just received it in the mail, so
Yeah.
not yet. Yeah,
So this is my Dharma brother, Daitsu Tom Wright, and he and I are good friends. And I think he's in transitioning back to Japan now. He lived in Hilo in Hawaii for many years, but now, because of living expenses, they're pretty crazy in Hawaii. So I think that's one of the reasons why he's thinking about moving back to Japan. So I don't know if he's there yet or not, but anyway, this is just such a good book. Um, Unfortunately, it's not a wisdom book, but it's a Shambhala book. But um, uh, anyway, it's based on some talks that Uchiyama Roshi gave on the what's called Zen, his teaching on the eight qualities of a great person. The Hachi Dai Ningaku is in Japanese. Hachi just means eight. So it talks about becoming an adult and what that means. And for Uchiyama, becoming an adult means being a bodhisattva, putting others ahead of you. You got the bodhisattva vows, right? And he had an interesting take on this that Shohaku Okumura Roshi told me about. It says, beings are numberless, I vow to save them, right? Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to become it. This was San Francisco Zen Center translation, but so beings are numberless, I vow to save them. How are you going to do that? That's an impossible vow, right? Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. You're always going to have delusions. We sit within delusion, right? And Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. If they're boundless, how can you enter all of them, right? Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to become it. How can you become a Buddha? So, that was the first talk he gave to Shohaku-san when he was ordained. He says, we've got these vows. He says, you can't do these. He said, we vow not to kill. Well, if you eat even if you just have miso shiru and vegetables, you're still killing the vegetables, aren't you? So, you know, and so that's your koan, kind of a koan, right? How are you going to fulfill these impossible vows, right? So, anyway, sorry, that's a little bit off the point, but this book is a great book. Uchiyama Roshi writes in what they call in Japanese zuihitsu, which is just like uh, uh, kind of stream of consciousness. So things that come into his head, he'll write about, and you'll be going like, why is he talking about that? And then suddenly he'll drop a bombshell about the self, right? So anyway, I highly recommend this book.
Yeah.
And yes, we've been reading this lately, and it's a really amazing book.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. I mean, it's a wonderful. I appreciate it. It kind of goes in line with what you were saying about in your descriptions of practice with Uchiyama Roshi, where it is the presentation of some of the formal elements of practice that you might see, the sitting a certain way
Mm.
and some chanting certainly, but then there also is this like, well, here are the rules. I have them right here. Um, how can we do this? Like, I don't know how to do this. And it kind of, it makes you have to reflect in the koan, like we were talking about earlier, where it makes you have to reflect on something a little bit deeper and more within yourself. You really have to look inside to answer some of those questions, I suppose, if you can. And it just ties it ties beautifully into that. Here's the form. It's good for nothing. It's just to do it. It's just to just sit.
You're
It's
not
just
going to
to
make
be.
any money off it.
Yeah, yeah.
You're not
uh,
going to get that new car.
right,
Yeah.
right. So it's just really wonderful to see that through line, and to have it be such a important uh, teaching lineage to have a connection with that you have with your teachers, but also too that you continue to facilitate other people having access to it through things like the Everett Zazen Group. Well, and I want to take a quick moment to just offer a space for anything that you'd like to promote. And I know that we've been talking about it now for a second here, but I wanted to bring more attention again to it. Your book coming out, The Sound That Perceives the World, Calling Out to the Bodhisattva, and that will be out through Wisdom Publications November 25th. I didn't know if is there going to be a pre-order, do you think, available at all?
I
Or
think there might be if you go to the Wisdom website. I was there yesterday, and it looks like, yeah, you can maybe order it or pre-order it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Definitely want to direct people to that. And then also I wanted to draw attention one more time to Everett Zazen Group, which is everettzazengroup.org. And you have online practices twice a week, one on Wednesdays and one on Saturdays. Both look like they're in the morning, Pacific. And yeah, so but if there's anything else that you'd like to have people consider
Well,
or promote, yeah.
yeah, I mean, Uchiyama Roshi used to give advice to the monks that came there and sat, and he said, "Okay, you need to sit for 10 years. Just shut up, sit down." He didn't ever said shut up, but he just that's what he meant. Sit down, shut up for 10 years. Okay. When 10 years is finished, 10 more years, and then when that 10 years is finished, then sit. Excuse me, sit for 10 more years. And he says, probably by that time you'll have figured out who you are. And I think, the deepest things Uchiyama Roshi says are how you are one with the universe. Um, and so, that's the Jiko. That's the universal self, the self that's beyond discrimination. Um, I is it okay for me to say it? We're going on here a little
Yeah,
bit.
no, please, please.
Okay. I mean, recently I've been, kind of reading the, well, it's translated various ways, but um, poem on faith in mind. And it's by the Chan master Senkan. I don't speak Chinese, so Shinjin Mei in Japanese. And, they say the supreme, or so actually arriving at the way, the way, of course, the Buddhist way, right? Arriving at the way is not difficult. It just dislikes picking and choosing. So stop judging. This is good. This is bad. I like this. I don't like that. You know, that's the way. But of course, we need to live in this life, right? So we need to make judgments every day. But what Uchiyama is pointing to with that 10 years, 20 years, 30 years is becoming intimate with the self that pervades the universe, which is what we all are. But we don't realize it, and we can never intellectually realize it. So I thought that was really one of his most important messages. Yeah.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you for going into that because like yeah, I believe I've heard, if not directly from Uchiyama Roshi's writings or something like that, but from other Zen teachers saying there's those stories of an attendant monk or someone, a student following around a teacher for like a really long time, for like decades, and be like, I haven't gotten anything from this. It's like, yeah, good. It's like, oh, like those kinds of stories.
Right,
So
right.
so I put it, but but you have offered just some helpful insights into to to what's being done, or like to how to phrase it for yourself, where you are maybe letting your likes and dislikes take a backseat to just kind of be that agent of the universe in this manifestation, while still living in this world that operates within some dualities and some choices to be made and decisions. Um, and that was wonderful, wonderful advice. And I usually ask, I hope it's not too much to ask, but like, on top of what you just said, which was wonderful, but do you have any particular advice that you'd want to offer somebody, for people that want to get their head right, man, and or however it is that are specifically for people that are on the Buddhist, something that you would have wanted to have heard when you were coming through your Buddhist journey?
Right. Well, I had a conversation with Okumura Roshi once, and I said, God, because he gives these Dharma talks about Dogen. And I don't know if you've read much of Dogen, but Dogen is not easy to understand. And the purple mountains are walking or something. What? And I listen to his, and Shaksan really tries to explain these, but I still don't get it a lot, and I'm confused. And so I said to him, I said, Buddhism is so difficult, to understand, like Dogen and so. And he says, yeah, that's true. He says, but it's also really easy to understand. You just let go of the hand of thought. And that's what you do in Zazen. You sit there and you don't know it, but there are times where you're able to let go of the hand of thought, let go of thoughts, and other times where you're not. Other times where you're thinking about, oh Jesus, I'm behind on my debt payments or whatever. Oh my God, I need to do that. That comes up too. And you just keep putting your effort into the position and letting go of the hand of thought. Uchiyama Roshi used to use that gesture. He would say, Atama o tebanas. Atama is head. Let Tebanasu is let go. So let go of thought. Let go of the hand of thought. So that's where that expression comes from. Let go of the hand of thought. If you read, you know, well, I can't remember Uchiyama Roshi's first book, but anyway, um, let go of the hand of thought.
Yeah, I think it is like opening the hand of thought. Like I think that's like the title. And then I haven't seen the physical gesture that you're doing, which is like having the hand up close to your head and then opening up with your fingers and like uh
He
it.
would do that all the time. He would
But
just
it's very,
Atama o tebanas.
yeah. But it really is theatrically or like maybe just visually it's a very clear signal, and
Yes,
I really appreciate seeing that energy brought to something that I've seen like written down before. So
right.
thank you for that. And also too there was when you were talking about that kind of distracted thinking that can come up. I remember watching something, I think, or no, I was reading maybe an anecdote that someone had with Okumura Roshi, and uh, after all of these years that he's been doing Zen practice, I think this is maybe when he was still abbot. Someone was asking him, uh, what do you before you give a Dharma talk, like how do you do zazen before a Dharma talk? Like, what are you thinking about? Like, when that, are you able to clear your head? He's like, no, before I do a Dharma talk, I think about the Dharma talk when I'm doing zazen. Like, I still get muddled, and that's just like a very, it just, it brings everything down to a very accessible place where it's like, even if you're decades long in your practice, you still have a mind. It still can get kind of muddle your focus or whatever it is. But then
Yeah.
there's that actionable moment where you can let go. You can let go of that hand of thought. So Howard, thank you so much for speaking with me today. This is such
Oh,
a
thank you very much. I'm sorry if I took it too long.
No, this is a really wonderful conversation, and thank you for offering so much of your story, offering so much of Uchiyama's story, and for contributing to the Zen world, the Buddhist world, with the sound that perceives the world, calling out to the Bodhisattva. I'm really excited for that to come out this fall, and thank you so much for taking your time, taking the time out of your day to speak with me today.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.